Of hands, how many here today, online or in person, wear or have ever worn eyeglasses or contact lenses? Pretty well everybody here. I'm glad to see that. I'm not alone in the crowd. I'm here today to tell you that if you have ever worn eyeglasses or contact lenses, you have an advantage over those who have not worn glasses or contacts when it comes to understanding what it means to see the world through the eyes of your heart enlightened. Now, I know there are times us glasses wearers have felt a little disadvantaged, right? Try wearing a mask and glasses these days, right? Are your glasses not always fogging up? Try doing it in Canada. I walked around looking through a fog all time I was away. And how about, anyone ever have this? When I was back in high school, it was a terrible time. You know, you're trying to impress the girls and you break your glasses. And in my family, my parents would say, we have an insurance policy that allows you to get a new pair of glasses only once every 2 years. So if you broke your glasses for a long time, you had to walk around with that big piece of electrical tape or masking tape in the middle of your forehead, and try looking cool with a big chunk of masking tape in the middle of your forehead. Or how about this? Anyone ever, when you were a kid, get called Four Eyes? I remember Four Eyes. You know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I don't know. I think names can be pretty hurtful too. Grow up learning to think of yourself as Four Eyes, two in your head, two here. And how about ever go out someplace and you forgot your glasses? You're going to a movie, or you're going to a lecture, or you're going to some presentation, or even a meeting, and someone even shouted on the way out, "Don't forget your glasses!" And then when you get there, you sit down and you start doing the Roman Catholic, where are my glasses? I forgot my glasses. I know sometimes we felt disadvantaged when we had glasses, but I'm here today to tell you that when it comes to understanding what it is to see the world through the lens, through the eyes of your heart enlightened, at this point, we are actually advantaged. I'll show you what I mean. Those of you who have your glasses on today, if you feel comfortable doing this, I'm going to invite you to take your glasses off for a moment. And I want you to think about what you see when you have your glasses off. If you're like me, what you see are maybe vague shapes, but a whole lot of fuzziness. Sort of like VHF television was when I was a kid, you know, it was always getting fuzzy. The world to me without my glasses on looks extremely fuzzy. I can't see any details whatsoever. But then when we put our glasses on, you can put your glasses back on, everything comes into focus, doesn't it? It's not that the world around us changes at all, but the lens that we put on brings everything back into focus for us. I think that's what Paul's talking about when he says that he's praying that we could see the world through the lens or the eyes of our hearts enlightened. It's not that the world's changing, we're seeing it differently when we look through the lens of our faith in Jesus Christ. I remember back in seminary days, there was very heady theological discussions about, was Jesus God or was Jesus the Son of God? And I thought these are a little too intellectual for me. I've always believed that I'm not super smart, but I do work hard. And you can accomplish a lot by working hard. But here at seminary, it's required. And people would spend hours and they'd dig into textbooks and, well, so-and-so and Karl Barth said this and Paul Tillich said this. And, you know, is Jesus God or Son of God? But after many, many years, I don't know the answer to that. But I like to think that Jesus is the lens of God. Jesus is the lens through which we view the world, and the world comes into focus. We see the world not just how it is or how some want to present it as, a world of deceit and lies and division and sinfulness. And not the world even how it could be or should be, but the world how it will be as God works to restore our lives through Jesus Christ. Jesus is the lens through which we see the world and through which we see God rightly. You may notice in the book of Ephesians, when I read that today, Paul said, as you come to know Jesus, I pray that you might have a revelation and a spirit of wisdom. He's not just talking about seeing the world with our hearts, and that's not a bad thing to have a heart, to see it with emotion, but he's talking about having a relationship with Jesus Christ, learning Christ's Word, studying His Word, praying to Him, walk with Him. Remember our old hymn? And He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own. It's as we make that faithful walk with Jesus Christ each and every day of our lives that Paul prays we might be blessed with a spirit of wisdom, that we might begin seeing things through the eyes of our hearts enlightened. It's not just about seeing it through our hearts, which is fine, it's emotion, but there's something even bigger that Paul has in mind. Through that relationship with Jesus Christ, the Spirit has an opportunity to allow us to see in a brand new way. It was very brand new at the time when Paul wrote that. Jesus had just walked and talked and lived in the world. And ever since, we've been beginning to see this world through the eyes of our hearts enlightened. You know, when we see the world through the eyes of our hearts enlightened, I think we start to see each other in a brand new way. We start to see each other in the way that Christ saw us, with mercy and compassion, and with a need for justice at times. We start to see each other as a person whose life is valued, whose life is precious, enough for Jesus to lay His own life down to restore. We start to see each other as if each other matters. We're not some objective person hiding behind a mask. We're a flesh and blood human being who's been saved by Jesus Christ and is being restored and sanctified even now. We start to see each other in a brand new way. You know, we always say the eyes are the window to the soul, right? We start to look into each other's eyes and we start to see each other as human beings who are loved enough by Jesus that Jesus would lay His life down for each and every one of us. And we start to treat each other that way too, don't we? I see it all the time in this congregation, the hospitality of spirit by which you care for one another and you support one another. That's what is one of the greatest blessings of the church. When we start to see each other through the eyes of the heart enlightened, we start to treat each other in a brand new way. I don't know about you. I look at the way the world treats one another. I'm on the internet. I see Facebook and I see social media and Twitter and Instagram and I live in the real world. I live in this wonderful city of Savannah, and you know what? People don't treat each other very well all the time, do they? In fact, as Beth and I were driving home yesterday, we're coming down the I-95, and you would see the most inhumane thing. It's everybody for themselves. We're going to go faster than the other person. I don't care if I have to cut you off. And then when someone gets cut off, I don't even want to say, but we saw that old fickle finger of fate waving at one another all the time. But when we start seeing each other through the eyes of our hearts enlightened, we start to treat one another with a kind of kindness that's reflective of the way Jesus cared for each and every one of us. I want to challenge you. Next time you're out on the I-95, or next time you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you're tempted to treat them with anger or some sort of reproach. Hey, buddy, you just cut me off. I want you to say a silent prayer. Lord, forgive him as you have forgiven me. I want you to remember that Jesus Christ died for that person as much as Jesus Christ died for me. Jesus died for him and for her and for that so-and-so who just got into my lane when I was trying to pass. No, we start to treat each other differently when we see each other through the eyes of our hearts enlightened. You know, there's a story that we told often in our family, sometimes called the Star Thrower story. Some of you maybe remember it. It's a story about a man who had gone on a little vacation down in the Caribbean. And one night while he's down there, this tropical storm washes all these starfish up onto the beach. Thousands of starfish. And they're not dead. They're dying, but they're not dead yet. And as this man walks at the early dawn and he sees these starfish who are needing the water, he slowly starts picking up a couple of them and putting them back into the water. And about that time, the groundskeeper from the resort where he's staying comes along with this big trash bin and a plastic bag lining the trash bin and a rake and a shovel, and the groundskeeper's scooping up the starfish and throwing them in the bucket for dead. Because in his mind, my job's just to clean this beach so all the resort goers can have a nice clean beach in the morning. And he looks at this man who's on vacation picking up one by one these starfish and throwing them in the water. The groundskeeper looks at him and says, "What are you, off your rocker? There's thousands of starfish here. You can't save them all. What difference do you think it's going to make throwing one or two into the water?" The man doesn't say a word. He simply looks at the groundskeeper. Then he turns back to the task at hand. He bends down, he picks up another starfish and throws it gently back into the water. Then he turns to the groundskeeper and he said, "It made a difference to that one." That's the way Christ sees our lives. And when we are blessed with a spirit of wisdom along our walk with Jesus Christ, we start to see each other through the eyes of our hearts enlightened, so that we work and care for one another as if we want to make a difference for each other. Because it matters. It matters to this one, to this one, to this one. It matters to all you out there watching online. It matters. And we begin to see that, and we begin to act that way when we walk with Christ, and we're blessed with that spirit of wisdom that allows us to see through that new lens, the eyes of our hearts enlightened through the lens of Jesus Christ, just as Jesus would see us now. And it's more than that too, isn't it? It's more than that. As if that's not enough. That could be enough, right? But I believe that when we start to view the world through the lens of our faith, through the eyes of our hearts enlightened, when we start to view the world the way Christ views the world, we start to view it with hope. We start to view it with a confidence of our faith. You know, every Sunday at the end of worship, I always end by saying, "May God bless us with a mighty faith, that we might embrace the days in which we live with the confidence of our faith." When you view the world through the eyes of your hearts enlightened, you can see light shining even in a great time of darkness, can't you? When you view the world through the eyes of your hearts enlightened, everyone else around you may be in despair or discouragement, and yet you are blessed with hope. That's what it is to see through the lens of Jesus Christ. To believe that even those things that are broken can be restored. Even those things that are sick might be healed. Even those things that are sinful might be forgiven. Even those things that are dead might be raised up. It's the centerpiece of our faith, the belief in resurrection. That when we see the world through the eyes of our hearts enlightened, we believe that God actually can do this. And we begin to trust it and live with confidence each and every day that God is even doing that in our lives now. Did I ever tell you about that time? That old Bubba, what's his name, and the other fella took part in a social science experiment. See, these social scientists wanted to understand the difference between doubt and faith. They wanted to understand the difference between those who live with despair or cynicism and those who live with hope. And as you probably remember, old Bubba What's-His-Face, he's a bit of a doubter and a cynic and a skeptic. And so they took Bubba What's-His-Name and they put him in this room with all the latest and greatest technology you could ever imagine. All the hottest new 21st century flat screen, big screen, projection screen, surround sound systems. They gave him the latest gaming systems, even the stuff that hasn't been released yet. They gave it all to him. And you say, okay, Bubba, what's his name? You have fun in here. We'll be back in a couple hours to check on you. Then they took the other fella down the hall into a different room. And they put the other fella in this room where there was nothing but a big pile of manure. Just so y'all don't think I'm off my rocker here, the biblical term for that is Coprion. It's the stuff that Jesus said the gardener put on the fig tree to give it a little more time so it'd bear fruit. They put the other fella in this room with a big pile of Coprion, with manure, and said, okay, other fella, you have fun. We'll be back in a couple hours to check on you. Well, a couple hours pass. They go back to the first room where Bubba What's-His-Name's got all this latest, greatest gadgetry and technology. And they open the door, and everything's smashed. It's broken. Bubba What's-His-Name's taken stuff. He's broken it on the ground. He's thrown it against the wall. And they said, Bubba What's-His-Name, what's going on here? He says, this stuff's junk. He said, my friends got better. My neighbors got more. This stuff's junk. You guys could have done better for me. And they said, well, sorry to hear that, Bubba What's-His-Name, but it's what we gave you. Then they went back to that second room where the other fella was with the big pile of manure. They opened the door, and there's the other fella sitting in that big pile of manure, and he's throwing manure everywhere. He's throwing it on the walls. He's throwing it on the ceilings. He's covered in it, and he's laughing. He's having a great old time. And they said, other fella, what are you doing with all this manure? And he turns and he smiles at them. He says, I just know there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. I believe that when we view the world through the lens of our hearts enlightened, we still can see it with hope. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. We live with this conviction that even those things that people have done and intended for evil, God can use for good. We live with this conviction that even things that are broken can be restored. Even those things that have died will be raised up. That's why I believe that the day and age in which we live in, this time where we've got a pandemic going on, our politics seem to be rumbling like they've never rumbled before, I believe God's going to do good things out of this time. Don't get me wrong, I'm not tone deaf to the number of people who've died. I'm not tone deaf to the number of people who are sick. But I believe if we trust God, God will use it for good. Think about this. Who would have ever imagined that little old Montgomery Presbyterian Church, this little old Presbyterian congregation in a wonderful old shrimping community just outside of the beautiful city of Savannah, Georgia, this remote little congregation would somehow overnight become an international congregation? Who would have ever imagined that we would become not only Montgomery Presbyterian Church local, but Montgomery Presbyterian Church in North Carolina, Montgomery Presbyterian Church in California, Montgomery Presbyterian Church in Ottawa, Canada, and Winnipeg, Manitoba? Who would have ever thought? And yet, because we see with the world through the eyes of the heart enlightened, because we trust that God is doing a new thing even now among us, God has used it for good. No, we do not rejoice in the lives that are lost. And no, God did not cause that. We don't pin that on God. But just as Joseph said to his brothers who had once sold him into slavery and then came seeking help from him, Joseph, who had become a king at this point, he said, I forgive you. You intended it for evil, but God used it for good. I don't know how you can see that if you're not looking at the world through the eyes of your heart enlightened. No wonder Paul is praying for us. No wonder we continue to pray for one another, that we might be blessed with a spirit of wisdom, with a revelation as we walk with Jesus Christ each and every day of our lives, as His Word becomes part of our being, that we might be blessed with the eyes of our hearts enlightened too, that we might see each other with a generosity of spirit, and that we might see this world with hope and with promise. When I was just 5 or 6 years of age, I must confess, I must have been the biggest nerd on the planet. You see, what I wanted more than anything else were two things. I wanted a set of goalie pads for my shins when we played street hockey, and I wanted a pair of glasses. What 6-year-old kid wants glasses? I did. And I'll tell you why. My father had glasses, big old black framed glasses. That's why I'm wearing these today, because they kind of remind me of my dad's glasses. My brother, my oldest brother, Stephen, had glasses, big kind of nerdy brown glasses that kind of poked into the cheeks. Anybody who's remember those 1970s glasses? My brother David, our middle brother, he had glasses too. And I believed that somehow you weren't a man until you had glasses. I thought it was sort of a rite of passage. You know, you're born into this family, you get glasses, so now you're a man, and then eventually you start to shave. These are all the manly things that you do in your family. And I wanted to be one of the guys. I wanted to have that rite of passage. I wanted glasses too. Well, you know how this story's going to turn out. I'm wearing them today. It was in the 2nd grade, my teacher said to my mom, Mrs. Giuliano, I think Mark's having a hard time seeing the board, and I've moved him up to the front, but I think you need to get his eyes checked. And so I went down to the optometrist and do what we all do, you know, which one is better, right one, left one. And then the optometrist was a pretty cool doctor to me, because it was like a doctor who didn't hurt you. You just looked at stuff, left one, right one, which is more focused. And he said, magic words. Mrs. Giuliano, I think Mark is going to need glasses. Yes, I'm in. I made it into the club. But I was thinking us Christians have a kind of club too. It's not exclusive. Our doors are open, our hearts are open. But the club is this. We're baptized Christians. We wear the watermarks of God's salvation in Jesus Christ. Each one of us wears the marks of our baptism, which reminds us that we belong to God. We belong to this one Jesus who gave his life for us. We belong to this community, this club where people are seeing the world through the eyes of their hearts enlightened all the time. Well, many in this world have either forgotten their baptisms or they're not baptized at all, may stand back and look at this world and feel overwhelmed. Their eyes and their vision may be weary by what they're seeing in this world. I think us Christians who are baptized and remember the waters of our baptisms, we rub our world-weary eyes. We look at the world through the lens of Jesus Christ, and we see this world with hope. We see it anew, and we know that God is still walking with us, talking to us, and blessing us with the eyes of our hearts enlightened. Praise be to God. Amen.